It wasn't the east side, it was the east side?
No, the east side school was
Jefferson.
Jefferson. And then when they came over here, Norman High School was in that huge old 3-level building.
Don't call it huge old.
That was wonderful.
that building.
I know. So you can imagine what kind of plumbing that old building had. And as a matter of fact, we had one story about a time when skunks got into the basement of that building and their odor got into the plumbing and it just permeated all the floors and they just almost had to evacuate for about a week until they could get it.
Oh, really?
Okay, and Garrison was built, what we call Garrison, which is where our library and a couple of classrooms and the ninth grade offices are located. That was built after you left school, correctly?
That was built sometime in the 60s.
Now, I was here, the first year I was here was the year they tore down the old science building, or a building, to build the new science building.
When was that?
85, 1985. And then 3 years later, I was in language arts and they tore it down. Now maybe they didn't tear down an old, maybe there wasn't an old building there, maybe they just.
They remodeled around a couple of buildings that were there.
Okay, the far building that I can see down here was the local home economics building.
Okay, that's what we call the lab building today.
Okay, well now the shop was on the left side of that.
It was here, and we did have a cafeteria, but it was across acres in a house.
Oh, really?
The Boag. The Boag. The Boag building.
Okay, now where would the Boeing building have been in relation to Boyd Hall?
It was,
Right out the north.
Right out the north door and where the Opal is now? Here when you went to school.
Yes, but we had a wonderful balcony that you could throw pencils up to this acoustic ceiling and they would stick. So the ceiling was just a mass of these sharp pencils.
All right. And Elaine, is that what you remember too?
I don't remember. We have 880 students and it'll seat comfortably 600. So we have to run them in shifts or do the tickets for the ones who want to go, ones who want to
Pull
go.
that wall back here. What kind of things do you do in classrooms? This is your auditorium. You walk in, you say you wanted to try.
Tell them about how much
Those doors up the balcony. And I have a pencil in here, I can kind of stick it to the ceiling and show you all this.
We still got kids who try to do that.
Oh, I didn't do that.
Sandy, one of the reasons that they closed, were willing to close the balcony. Yes, they needed the classroom. And one of the reasons they were willing to close the balcony is because anytime kids sat up there, all they did was piss and giggle.
We had sock hops in the gym then, but that's also where we played basketball, so it was a multi-purpose area. And the balcony was still in the gym,
auditorium.
in the auditorium at that time. No air conditioning and wooden seats.
Also things have changed since now.
And you were telling the girls when we first came in that you taught in the room next door and across the hall,
The
right?
only room that I taught in that faced the west is the end room down there that may have been the library when you first came.
Okay. No, it wasn't when I first came, but
But you know where
I
it
know
was.
where it was, yeah.
Uh-huh.
And then, but you taught in
And then I taught in the room across the hall. But now I taught in there 10 years before, and that was the room that belonged to my sister-in-law, who was the one who did the ginger snaps with me. And then I taught in the end room
at the top of the stairs,
at the top of the
which would be
stairs on the
Mrs.
east side.
Stuckey's room today, right? Yeah.
It's called, and then,
You
and
said-
then for the most part, I taught in that great big room.
Okay. And then were you in the end room down on the west, on the
East
not east
side,
side, but on the
Southeast.
southeast corner too, which would be Dr. Shelf's room now, right by the stairway.
yeah.
Yeah.
That helped our discipline always, We went up one stairway and down the other. You all still do that?
No.
So, no, I mean, the kids went up one
The
and down there?
kids.
Okay, in 1991, I came here as principal. And the first day, I was out walking the halls, trying to get to know kids and see how the day was going. And I started up this flight of stairs. And all of a sudden, my stomach began to hurt. Because in 1955, when I was going here as a student, I had algebra at the top of these stairs. And algebra always made me ill. So that began to come back. And I had to remind myself, John, that's not where you are right now.
Well, let's wander up the stairs here and see if we still get those butterflies. Okay, now we're sitting in the room at the top of the stairs, which was Dr. Jones's algebra room,
And
right?
I'm sitting at the very back of the room where I can hide, so he won't call on me.
Okay, did it work?
Yes, most of the time.
Most of the time. Okay, and the rest of you remember this was an English room, is that
That's
correct?
right.
You had English. Mrs. Cersei's English room, okay? Now, when you were going to, Dr. Jones was here in the 1950s, you guys graduated in 1950, so you were here during the 1940s, all right? Was this, tell us about Boyd Hall. Was it Boyd Hall then?
No, I never heard of Boyd Hall until you started doing these archives and looking at the history, and I kept hearing this Boyd Hall. I'd never heard of such a thing. I went home and asked SG about it. You've never heard of it?
The first time I heard it was in the hall.
Okay, this was just Norman High, right?
It was Norman Hall.
All right. Now, the old building was still a part of the campus then, or the one that we looked at the picture of downstairs. What was it called, or how was it referred to?
Which one is that?
Junior high.
The junior high building.
The one that was just,
Yeah.
that was a junior high for 8th and 9th.
Just
We
right.
went to grade school from 1 to 7, elementary school was from 1 to 7. Then 8, 9, and then 10, 11, and 12 in this
Okay. Now, were all of your classes in this building?
building.
Where was
Oh, my
Uncle
high
Dizzy?
school class?
It's
Oh, my.
like that shop or something like that, it was in the back there.
And home economics.
Oh, yeah.
But
I
they
did
were
one of-
Uncle Music and Band.
I didn't take those. so
Well,
I don't
I know.
You sang, but I didn't take.
No,
The band was right beyond the stage. There was another
Oh,
part of this building that was
That's
the
right.
band room and the chorus.
that's it.
it was in one of these rooms apparently.
Well, I had vocal
It was in
music
the
in
junior high building.
Yeah, I had vocal music.
Oh, it was in the.
But then someone else had said that band was on the top floor of that same building. And then the classrooms, the other classrooms were used for classes too.
Approximately
But-
how many students attended Norman High then? If this was it, this one single building was it, how many kids went to this school?
Well, we had about 200 graduated.
200?
And I think we were just talking, we had about 150 that time.
There might not be.
Well, somewhere
Well, I bet
between
you
700
didn't
and
have-
800 students went to school there.
In this building,
No.
probably
Building?
about. You remember the names?
Well, I remember Miss Kennedy as my music teacher. I had a science teacher, her name was Mrs. Johnson, and she was, I hate to say this, but sometimes science teachers are just a little strange, but she was really, really a great lady. She got caught up on science fairs, and she encouraged you even at that level to get into science fairs. And she encouraged me to do a thing with popcorn, and I'll never forget how you added a little bit of water and did this. And I won, and I went all the way to state with my science fair project. So.
Okay. What was your favorite thing you can remember about Central?
Oh, I can't remember, but
Was it the popcorn?
no, well, no, I don't think that was really a favorite thing. I had lots of good friends at Central, and most of the teachers I really liked at the time. I can tell you some of my least favorite things. We had a building at the time that was really condemned, but we were still having classes in it. And I'll never forget one time our Oklahoma weather decided to do its thing. It was one spring, and the sirens started sounding, and it was we were in that condemned building, and they put us all out in the halls, and the doors were flapping open and closed, and it was kind of a scary time. It wasn't too long after that they didn't let anybody go into that building. So.
Okay.
That's fun. I mean, the kids didn't like me as well. You know, they thought I was awfully strict when I came back.
Do you think that's because you were talking earlier about the parents and discipline and being, you know, the expectation that you would respect your teacher? Do you think that was what had changed, that parents were not?
No, not in that.
A lot of, you talk about staying up here to grading papers. Did you find that teachers did a lot of that, staying in the building, working late and being with kids? Or did they just go home to their families?
Well, everybody was supposed to stay until 4 o'clock. When I was in the other building toward the end, you know who Sue Virtue is?
Mm-hmm.
Well, Sue and I stayed up and graded papers a lot. But the others didn't so much, but I graded papers at home at night. When we had, I think it was 2% could get A's and 25% could get C's. And then, and that didn't sound right to me when I was trying to figure it out a while ago. But so part of the time it was 6% could get A's, okay, and 6% got F's. And we graded our papers on that basis. And that was taught to us in the university to do it that way. And I was told to do it that way, and that's what I did. So I was just amazed this time when I come back and half the school had the 3.5 average.
West mentality exists then?
There were jokes about if you lived on the east side of town, it was connected to the mental hospital. That was what you thought of if you're from the east side, and they'd go, oh.
But there weren't really.
No.
Not the kind of bitter rivalry.
No, there was just one, it was just one, maybe in grade school, you know, there were 5 grade schools.
There was
and
competition
the competition like that, but after you got here, this was it. I mean, everybody was in the same boat. So.
And you know, with our class, Karen, I looked back and I thought it was just wonderful. We had a group of us that were all really good friends, and half of them lived on the east side and half on the west. And so sometimes just because of proximity, you would do some things. You'd pick up the friends on your side of town to go somewhere to meet the others. And they would do the same. But we still were all one big group that enjoyed each other. And there was never any.
We've had comments from classes both below us and ahead of us saying they were really amazed at the closeness that our class maintained all the way through school. I mean, the last boy would ask the last girl to the party. Nobody was like that. Everybody took care of each other.
Took care of each other. How about now when you went to, had the east-west split become a reality by the time you got here?
East-west. I never felt that here at Central. Reading in the older books and the yearbooks, it definitely was there in the elementary schools because it's noted at one point that the first East-West football game took place among 7th graders, I guess, 6th graders from 2 different elementary schools.
Probably 7th graders.
And one of the coaches won, and he went on to be then one of the coaches at the high school because he won that football game. You know. So that was noted in one of the books. But as far as an east-west feeling when I was here at Central, or even when I was at Norman High, I was not aware of that.
I guess cheerleaders. More people are in sports. Yeah.
And math and physical ed and chorus. And I guess what else was I supposed to take? What else?
Would you take like home ec, homemaking, or anything like that? Foreign language like French or Latin?
Not in the 8th grade, I took that in the 9th grade.
Okay.
I guess I had history.
Okay.
Is that it?
Yeah, yeah.
Four
Plus
was
PE
was PE
and chorus.
and chorus.
That pretty well take care of it. And chorus, and you were in the three-story building that they tore down in the 1960s, right? The building that was over here on Gray Street, the permanent on Gray Street. All right, and you came to that building in the 8th grade, and then you came over here for high school, is that correct?
No. See, we had some classes over there and some of them over here. And I'd have, I came over here.
So you'd move,
That would probably be right.
you'd move back and forth, and depending on what you're
I
doing.
moved back and forth, and even when I taught back and forth.
And am I correct that like chorus was in the other building?
Yes, at that time. Sometimes later on, we had chorus in this building at noon. See, we had a long lunch period so that everybody could take chorus. And then we had it in the auditorium
Now,
from 11:30 to 12.
okay, I'm trying to,
And then they also had, sometimes they had it in that building in the basement floor. And that was Ross and Waffler. Okay.
your lunches, you said you had a long lunch, but did most kids leave campus to go eat somewhere else, or did
You
they
had
eat?
to. There was no cafeteria.
One of the things you were telling us about was that you were a member of the Ginger Snaps.
Mhm.
Was the Ginger Snaps something that had been around before you came to
Yes.
Northern High? Okay, and what was the reason for that group, or what was the purpose of that group?
Pep Club.
Pep Club.
You don't know about Ginger
Well, I do, but I was hoping you might see if the stories match.
Ginger Snaps Pep Club, and it was very, very successful. When I was voted into it, I think maybe there were 2 of us from the 8th grade class who were voted into Ginger Snaps.
So you couldn't just join because you
You
wanted to?
could not join. You could not just join Ginger Snaps. And then I was president when I was a senior. And that year, there were so many people who wanted to belong to pep clubs that they forced us to take 60. And then later on, it got so that anybody could. So I think by 1943, before that, 1942, there were 135 in it.
Wow.
But it was so, our pep clubs were so that they established another pep club, and was that in 1929, 28? Anyway, the Tigrettes.
Under the University of Oklahoma?
Right. I want to tell you some more about the business.
Okay, tell us more about that.
Was it only females allowed to join, or?
Only females in Ginger Snaps, and only females in Tigrettes. But we had 2 boys pep clubs, the Hardheads and the Tiger Devils, which you have probably gotten from trails. But the Ginger Snaps took a lot of responsibility. When we did the between half skits at the football games, the band didn't do it. We did. We did the Queen coronation. Callie and I did. We sold the football tickets, went up and down Main Street and took care of that. We bought the band uniform for the band queen. I think, as I look back now, any job that needed to be done,
You did it.
they knew that we would do it. Then there was one little thing that you may still do. Whenever we're going to have a ball game or anything, we'd get in the line, put our hands on the shoulder, and say, "You're pep, you got it, now keep doggone it, don't lose it." We went all through the building. Then we went downtown, and we went all through the stores, and then we went all through the movie theaters. And then we had a big bonfire.
All right. Okay, tell us about your tennis career.
Well, I loved to play tennis and played off and on, but there were no organized sports for girls back then. But I lived over on Chautauqua, and one of my neighbors was Mary Ellen Casey, and both of our fathers were professors at the university. And we would go over and play tennis together along the university courts. And then we decided we were pretty good. Some of the OU tennis players became advisors. And so we decided to enter, our junior year, we decided to enter the state tournament, which we did. And we got to the semifinals in the state tournament. So, as a result, Mary Ellen was a little bit more, what shall I say, forward-thinking than I was as far as girls' participation in things. So she went to the principal and told the principal she felt that we should be lettered because we had advanced that far, and that if a boys' team had done that, they certainly would be lettered. So they agreed to give us a letter, and they did that, in assembly. And it was, I was a bit nervous about that because of all the boys in the class, and they would tease us about it. They teased me about it, and so I was a bit nervous about that. But they did let us our junior year. Then my senior year, I also liked to swim. In my senior year, we had a club that was sponsored by the university, women's, not athletic, it was the women's PE department, and that we were called the Ducklings because OU women's swimming team was called the Ducks. So these Norman High girls, and there were about 8 of us, they called us the Ducklings, and we did synchronized swimming.
Okay.
So we decided at some point then that we would enter the state tournament in swimming, which we did, and most of us placed 3rd and 4th, and so they lettered that group of girls. Then it was my senior year.
So did they have organized sports for girls before you guys did your thing with tennis and swimming?
Not that we know of, although, I've read that there were girls competing in things. I don't know.
But there was no organized girls basketball, volleyball, or anything like that? Team sports?
Not when we were in school.
Kind of, were there any team sports for girls?
Gymnastics is about the only thing that I don't think that they had, I don't think that they had football, softball, or anything.
The Ginger Snaps traveling with the football teams and
No, oh, about,
and
not-
and using the money.
I took a bus of kids to all out-of-town football games on Friday nights. That was a big job. And that's where they had fines if they didn't do so-and-so, and they had to be right there on the bus. We were very, very particular.
But the money that you collected from doing that, you used to buy war bonds, is that correct? Okay, is that-
Savings bonds.
Savings bonds
Savings.
during
I mean, we could,
right. During the war, and then
that was before.
you did that before the war. You bought savings bonds before the war, and then during the war.
I don't know when they bought them.
But they used the money from those football trips to buy the bonds, and then used the money from the bonds. to
Not
buy
from the
yeah,
trips, just
Okay.
from the Ginger Snap fines.
From the Ginger Snap
Sometimes they were fined for being late
Okay.
to a pep club meeting. Sometimes they were fined if they did not sit with the Ginger Snaps, if they had a date and sat with the date, for everything. And if you think that wasn't a job, collecting all those fines,
But that was fun.
that was my job.
How much were the bonds?
10 cents, 25 cents.
But then that's the money that you used to buy the bonds that were in turn used to buy the grand piano.
Right.
Okay, now I got the story straight.
Now you have it straight.
Now I got it straight. Kinds of extracurricular activities that kids have available to them.
Karen, I think it was mostly yearbook and cheerleading.
Well, the
Band
head club,
and
head club was real popular.
Ginger Snaps.
The ginger snaps,
snaps.
right? The ginger snaps. Okay. And that's why we're going to have ginger snaps cookies at
That's
the
why we're gonna have
celebration.
Ginger Snaps at the reception.
And although it was kind of frowned on by a lot of the teachers, there were some social clubs in
Oh, yes.
Oh.
there. SGC and Sunday, and what were the boys?
Did you guys have, we had these when I was in high school and they were frowned on too, but did you have initiation
Oh, yeah.
and pictures and put on dances? We did that when I was in school, these were mini sorority kind of.
Actually, what the young club did on the schools. It was, oh, would it be?
I'm trying to think, I should have gone through my old scrapbook because I have all these invitations to dances. I quit my social club with 3 other girls, which was unheard of.
Why?
Yeah, that was,
Why?
and
Or do
I
you want
had
to tell
teachers
us?
take me to the cloakroom and congratulate me.
Oh, really?
But
Why, or do you want to share why?
so I quit.
Mhm.
It was really silly to
What activities were you involved in personally at Central?
Well, other than just classes, I was a member of the chorus. And one of our administrators now with Norman Public Schools, Leanne Kennedy, was my music director.
What kind of hangouts did they have back then for kind of high school students and stuff? Do you remember your names and stuff?
No, actually, we didn't. When we hung out at home. You know, when we weren't in class. There, like I said, there was a little store across the street, but you really didn't hang out there unless you wanted to get in trouble or something. So there weren't really a lot of hangout type places.
Oh, your jazz bands are great. I've heard that both of them in Central. They're cool.
Yeah, and they're vocal.
And let's talk just a little bit more, like we talked a little bit more about Teen Town.
Okay.
Because that was something that was really, really big in the yearbooks that we looked at. And it was a governed association. They had a mayor and rules, but it also had a school sponsor that met with them. Elaine, talk a little bit more about it.
Well, that was having moved in from somewhere else. That was all really new to me, and I don't know as much about the structure. I know that they were well supervised events on Friday night. They may have had some Saturday night things. I don't remember.
I'm sure they did. Well, we had square dancing and had people that taught us that. We loved that.
Yes, it was mostly on Saturday because Friday nights are most of our athletic events.
And it was downtown in the 100 block of East Main,
That's
on
good.
the upstairs on the north side of the
About
street.
Mr. Walker.
Yeah, I lived in front of Mr. Robertson. Maybe a little further east than
Then a couple of pool halls. I can't remember if we had any food. Did we have food?
Pool table.
Yeah, pool tables.
Yeah.
We did have.
We had
Oh, yeah, when I say pool halls, we had pool tables. But we always music, dancing was a big thing for us, jitterbagging.
Well, and then we also had things down at the, and they tore that down, no, down at the park in
Andrews Park.
Andrews Park in that middle rock building that they torn down.
Then, and we did. And we didn't have money. You could go, the senior theater was 25 cents, 35 cents. But we couldn't do that too often. And so for our entertainment, we usually, 5 or 6 couples would go to somebody's house and we play records and dance. Then this one boy had a car. I mean, his family always let him have his car. And maybe about 5 or 6 couples, those 5 couples, I guess, well, that'd be too many, 3 or 4 couples, would get in his car. And Flood Street hadn't been built. Up then, it was all this pavement. I probably shouldn't tell him. And we'd go out and Sam would drive in, you know, and honk. And we cleaned it all out. They were courting. We cleaned it all out. They were university students. And so then we'd go down Hamilton and get a Coke sometimes. Then we'd drive, make the Main Street drag and drive around the university and come back. And then by that time, it's probably filled up again.
Filled up again, did you go back and clean it out?
So that was here in 1926.
Okay.
But that year, I went to, my classes were in the old building. Then they put the 8th graders over there, except for gym.
The gym was in this building and your other eighth grade
In the
classes?
auditorium. And
Dr. Jones was here in the 1950s, you guys graduated in 1950, so you were here during the 1940s.
I started in the 7th grade in 1958 and went 2 years, 7th and 8th grade. During that time, they moved the freshman class over to the high school, so I spent my freshman year in high school, so I just was there for 2 years.
I went there from 1971 through 1974, and I went there for that many years because when I went, originally Central was grades 7, 8, and 9, and then they changed the grades to include to be 9 and 10 at Central, so I was there for the next 2 years.
And just to wrap it all up, I think Central has been a great school for a long time, whether it's been a mid-high, junior high, whatever it's been. And